Greetings, Sarah from Bernardston, Massachusetts. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk to you about nuclear power, more specifically about the Vermont Yankee plant. Now, you might have heard of this plant. It's in Vermont on the Connecticut River in between Massachusetts and Vermont, which is lots of states' names creating confusion. But basically, I'm in Bernardston, that's where I live right now, and that's about 5 minutes away from this plant. This plant, which has been in operation for 40 years now, is, as Democracy puts it, almost identical to Fukushima, which was the plant in Japan that put everybody all in a tizzy when it had a mishap. Vermont, being Vermont, has decided that they don't want this plant working in their state. But the federal government, being the federal government, is like, not so much. So right now it's in the courts, and it's kind of a thing about states' rights. Basically, this plant uses lots of bad chemicals, and it also puts its cooling water into the Connecticut River. And this causes the entire ecosystem to go on a crazy temperature roller coaster, except for not fun and deadly and bad. If you're a person who is concerned about your own health or the health of the environment in general, then this might concern you. So, of course, it concerns me. And when I'm concerned about something, I get involved usually. So how does one get involved in Vermont Yankee? Well, let me tell you. It is by repairing a giant cow, hanging out with Harvey, and doing data entry. Right now I'm going to let you hear what Harvey has to say, because I could throw a bunch more facts at you and explain all the legal stuff that's going on with this plant, but first of all, I don't fully understand it, and second of all, I think that a lot of the times it means a lot more when you hear it from somebody who's really involved and you hear about their story. So, this is Harvey.
My name is Harvey Shack. I live in western Massachusetts. I've lived here for almost 35 years. And I'm an organizer for CAN, the Citizens Awareness Network. And what we do is we organize people, educate people to shut down nuclear reactors, specifically the ones that are around here, and we actually were successful in shutting down 3 so far. In 1991 I was living here, and I was a father of a couple of young kids, and I hadn't really thought anything about nuclear power. So I wound up going to this hearing, and it was incredible. Almost 1,000 people showed up. And we started meeting, getting together, and in the middle of that, there was a fierce thunderstorm, lightning storm that came from the east going west. And first it knocked out the power to the Vermont Yankee reactor. Only 20 miles further west was this Yankee Row reactor, and the power was knocked out to that. And what that means is there was an emergency. Nobody would even know for half an hour. So we went to another meeting. So somebody got up and said, what happens if the Deerfield River floods and the reactor falls over into the river? And this chemist from the reactor stood up. And he was never allowed to speak again after he said this. But he says, oh, that's nothing. We've been dumping in your river for 32 years. And you could hear, you could hear shock in the audience. We did some research and we found that they were dumping tritium into that river for 30 years. And it's legal. That was the thing that was out, we were outraged by. Tritium crosses the placental barrier. It causes cancer and tumors. So we formed an organization, and we wound up becoming a 501c3 nonprofit. And that was starting in 1991, and here we are. In the 21st year, we're still going and growing. We're still trying to shut down Vermont Yankee reactor, and we're really close. And we know Fukushima, Chernobyl. These things happen. And this reactor is 40 years old. 40 years old. And so the longer it runs, the more likely something's going to happen. And very often what happens was never thought could happen, and that's what's so dangerous about it. And obviously, and you probably know this, but 100,000 people in Japan have lost their homes and can't go back.
Do you think it could be of that magnitude here?
Absolutely. In fact, in Vermont Yankee reactor, there's 10 times as much spent nuclear fuel in that reactor than there was in the reactor number 4 in Japan, in Fukushima. So what you see here is Bessie. And this is our latest piece of sort of propaganda. We used in a demonstration on July 1st at the reactor. And we had probably about 300 people show up. And we had Bessie 6 people with ropes were connected to this platform, and people were walking down the street. And this is a Trojan cow. And we pulled it a half a mile, and the Buddhist monks are chanting, and the peace people are singing their peace songs, and people were in costume and all kinds of, holding up all kinds of signs. And we get to the reactor, and there's 9 state trooper cars and cops with dogs. And so we roll Bessie up to the, and out of her belly, we open up a trap door, and out of her belly comes solar panel. And as like a bunch of Trojan warriors, we stood up at the gates and people held the solar panels there. It does create energy, but right now, none of the energy, see this reactor is located in Vermont. None of the energy, the electricity that this reactor produces is consumed by a Vermonter. So here you have the residents of Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, because it's right on the border of those 3 states. They're all bearing the risk, and there's virtually no benefits in terms of electricity. Yeah, there's jobs. The 250 workers at the reactor, 165 live in Vermont, the others in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Yeah, and they're good paying jobs, the highest paying jobs around here. But think of what's happened historically. With the steel plants in Pennsylvania or Ohio, when they lost out to China or Japan, the competition, they shut down. Well, there were workers that were there. They didn't just stand in one spot and not have any food and just die there. You get retrained, and hopefully the corporation will pay for the retraining. These kind of things happen all the time. Change happens all the time.
Do you think that the amount of energy produced by the plant could be produced in a different way?
Yes, there are clean alternatives. We have to retrofit, we have to go back, weatherize people's houses, fit them with solar hot water, and there's the jobs. There's the jobs. You just move the workers into another area that's benign and not destructive and threatening. I don't think it's a problem. It just takes commitment. Obama is not committed to this. He promotes nuclear energy.
You think Romney is?
No, I'm kidding. I don't even consider it.
How do we do it if the politicians aren't behind it?
Force them. Force them to be behind it. You know, become engaged and active. And man, it doesn't take many people to make change. It doesn't take many people at all. But now it's an issue of democracy. Does a state have the right to say what kind of energy production takes place within its borders? And all these Republicans are always yelling about states' rights, and the federal government is too powerful. But when one of their boys, their corporation boys, all of a sudden is involved in a states' rights issue, and it means they're going to lose money, all of a sudden they don't talk about state rights. You know, it's funny. Where's the integrity? What is this? So that's my story.
All right, Sarah. So one of the things that concerns me and interests me most in this fascinating world we live in is how we interact with what we call nature and how we choose to not interact with it. So maybe more interesting and horrifying than that is how we select the impacts that we do and do not acknowledge that we have on this nature. Now, I know that all situations are incredibly complex and have lots of sides, and we just heard Harvey, which is one side. I understand that. But it also seems pretty apparent to me through research, through talking to Harvey, just through being in the area, that the existence of a plant like this is harmful to the environment, and it's harmful to people. It's a threat. You know, it's kind of not a good thing, right? So this basically poses a lot of questions. So what do we do now? Do we move towards alternative forms of energy? And if so, how can we count on the government to support that? Can we really force the government to do these things, like Harvey said? Is that our place? What about states' rights? I guess more broadly what I'd be asking is something about environmental rights. You know, all of these things that the 21st century Western thought labels as nature, what if those were given rights much like humans? Then would it be in question that Vermont Yankee shouldn't exist? what kind of rights would be allocated to a river or an entire ecosystem? And should those rights exist? Basically, how far do we allow our human reach, our development to stretch before we say stop? And how long will it be until we start to see and realize and understand the effects of those actions on a larger system as well as ourselves? Something to think about, right? My weekly tidbit for you is Moonrise Kingdom. Now, I'm sure that the only reason this is my tidbit for you is because my video got posted first, because I know you must be ecstatic about it because it's Wes Anderson, and who needs another reason to be ecstatic other than Wes Anderson, right? But I saw it and I loved it, and I guess that makes my question of the week for you be, what kind of bird are you? Until next week.